Good morning. Welcome to the program. Today is Friday, November 20th, 2020. Do you know it's somebody's birthday today? It is somebody very important to a lot of you. It's their birthday. It is President-elect Joe Biden's birthday, and he is 78 years old. We probably should have a conversation about the president-elect being 78 years old. Maybe that is a topic of conversation. He is the oldest individual to be ultimately elected and sworn in as president of the United States. And he beat the record of the last oldest president of the United States, which was Donald Trump, who was 70 years old when he was inaugurated in 2017. The Democrats have a number of problems. And while I know we want to celebrate this victory, even though it seems to me it's very hollow because you have to balance the victory out with the fact that Donald Trump is able to proceed like he still won the election, and he didn't win the election. He lost it fair and square, but Republicans are still very much lined up behind him and supporting his loss as if it will turn into a victory. Something else very startling, and I don't think it's too early to talk about these things because this is not a one and done. This was not, so we had 4 years of a bad president. He said bad things. He tweeted bad things. He did bad things, but now he's gone. He's just going to disappear. We're used to ex-presidents disappearing and remaining unusually quiet unless they take up some kind of humanitarian cause. Like Jimmy Carter, who is literally 300 years old, he's really very old. And he just builds houses for Habitat for Humanity. He's just out doing humanitarian work. Or they become silent, or maybe the party will bring them out, talking about ex-presidents, Democratic presidents, we'll bring them out, we'll dust them off, and we'll use them to help raise funds for other Democratic candidates that are running for office. Bill Clinton was very good for that. For many years, the party used him for rallies and to drum up excitement and to help raise money for other Democrats. Barack Obama, I thought, was unusually quiet when there was a complete vacuum of leadership, unless you lived in certain states where maybe your governor or your mayor was a particular brand of leader. For many, many years, really most of the years of the Trump presidency, there wasn't anyone else who was credible, who could give the country a different perspective. I thought Barack Obama was that person. He is that person, but he stayed really, really quiet. In fact, I wanted him campaigning more. I know the pandemic put a hamper on that, but Barack Obama is a fixture who remains so incredibly important to Democratic politics and also to voters because the number of people that voted for Barack Obama, he did incredibly well, especially in states where you wouldn't think an African-American presidential candidate with a very Muslim middle name would perform well. So there was something about him that engaged people. And I think that he should have been a consistent part from the day he left office. He could have been a competing voice with Donald Trump, but he wasn't. I think that's part of his personality or whatever the case may be. But the popularity of Barack Obama still exists today. But then if we look a little bit further, do the Democrats have a deep bench of people to choose from? Because the Republicans, I got a story right here, which sad a little bit, but I think we have time to get out ahead of it. The Republicans are more optimistic about their future than the Democrats are about their future as a party, as a apparatus to get people elected that can help push policies that will benefit the people in this country. You would think that the Democrats would be more optimistic because you have Kamala Harris, who likely would be the next president of the United States, assuming everything goes okay. But we also don't know what's going to happen in the U.S. Senate. It is an entirely different America. It's a different world, actually. If the Democrats can get control of the US Senate by winning both runoff seats in Georgia. Georgia has recently certified, last 24 hours, their recount rather, election results. And as we would have figured, Donald Trump lost the state of Georgia. But if Kamala Harris is next up to bat for the presidency, who else, what other supporting cast members do Democrats have? We're going to have a U.S. Senate race here in the state of Wisconsin in the year 2022. Probably should talk about that in a little while. But if we don't have more individuals that can take on an optimistic Republican Party, this is going to be a problem. Good morning to everyone who has joined us via Facebook or YouTube or on Twitter. You can watch live on Twitter as well. Tutu Reeves, good morning. Kelly Curtin, Sherwin, tell us some good news today. I'm trying. There's something going on where so many Republican senators are still sticking with the president. They all know he lost. Imagine any senator that lost their race and just says, no, it was all fake. The election was fake. There's a bunch of fake mail-in ballots. I'm going to file a bunch of lawsuits with other people's money to try and overturn the election results. Could you imagine if the Packers played the Bears and the Bears lose per usual, and the Bears are like, no, it's fake scores, those were fake touchdowns. We want to have all the referees come back on the field and review every single play of every single down and all four quarters. No, we're not leaving the field. We technically won, but the Packers cheated. That's exactly what's happening. It's amazing how the entire country, in one form or another, is gaslit. Or we just have different perspectives on things, because Democrats should be in the streets protesting still, especially in states that have already been called. The votes have been counted and then counted again, but Donald Trump is refusing to concede. There needs to be more energy, because another Republican will do the exact same thing. If you tell people something enough times, if Donald Trump continues to tell people, I won the election, it was a bunch of fake news and fake polls and fake votes and a bunch of dead people voting, somebody somewhere is going to believe it. And this gives them a level of optimism about their party. But before we start popping the champagne, if the Democrats get the majority in the U.S. Senate by winning those two Georgia runoffs, which I'm going to tell you right now is an incredible long shot. It's going to be very, very difficult for Democrats to do that. We would need to win both of those Senate seats, and then Kamala Harris becomes the tiebreaker, the 51st vote, if you will, as she would be president and preside over the U.S. Senate. But only if both of those runoff elections in Georgia are successful wins for the Democrats. Successful in that those don't go to recount either, because we cannot have the state of Georgia continuing to count votes into the start of the next congressional session. So that's really where the presidency is. Joe Biden's probably only term as U.S. president is really going to hinge upon the success of runoff elections in Georgia, because a Democratic majority in the U.S. Senate can give Kelly Curtin the very good news that she is seeking. Gail Williams, good morning, all. Hey, Sherwin, what's the music, sir? So that is Hit Me Off by New Edition. Thank you for paying attention to my... See, Sherwin was a DJ in another life, so now I just play 60 seconds worth of songs that I like every morning. Vanessa Garrett, good morning to you. Dorian Higgins, good morning, my brother. Missed the music. Oh, you got here a little late, Dorian. Don't worry, it'll be there on the replay. Betty Thompson, good morning to you. Dorian Higgins says, happy birthday, Uncle Joe. Like, when I saw it, like, I know Joe Biden is old, and we had talked about it. I'm sure there were some discussions some time ago about, oh, he's going to be the oldest president and whatever. But I put it in the back of my mind, like, okay, whatever. He's the guy that we have. And we've had that argument for the last, I don't know, year and a half. Some of y'all didn't want Joe Biden. Some of us did. Now we got him. But then when I read the story today, Joe Biden is 78. I was like, damn, that is legitimately life expectancy for a white man in America. Like, he met it. Like, he might even be a little bit overtime. Like, he's playing extra innings, right? Because 78 is about life expectancy in America. What if Joe Biden runs for a second term? Because at this point, I don't even understand American politics anymore. It used to make a little bit of sense. What if Joe Biden runs for re-election in 4 years? Because who's to say he's not going to? He would be 82 years old. Okay. Hopefully him and Kamala have a talk about what they're going to do. Like, Joe, what's your retirement plan here? How are you going to, what's the legacy that you want to lead? Rodney Jackson, good morning. Miss Maybelline says, no deep bench. I would agree. If you take an inventory of the people that we have, right? And I think a good place to start would be a lot of the individuals that were vying for the Democratic nomination. And I can't remember all of their names. There was, you had Amy Klobuchar, you had Beto O'Rourke, you had Eric Swalwell, you had Julian Castro, you had Cory Booker. That's about it, right? I'm sure there's some other people, there's some rising stars, and also because of the coronavirus pandemic, people that we may not have considered leaders have risen to this particular occasion. And maybe some of those folks have risen to leadership levels locally and we just don't know them yet nationally. But there could be more people just over the horizon that we have not yet noticed. But if you imagine those Democrats that were vying for this nomination, like those are the people we're going to have to choose from for a number of years, but also couldn't figure something out. Why was Cory Booker's campaign so incredibly stalled? It's almost like and he's reasonably young, right? A Gen Xer, I'm assuming. His campaign did not catch fire, especially with younger-ish millennial Gen X African Americans, but Kamala Harris's really didn't either. And some of that was because of Kamala Harris's her past, I suppose, because when you're running in a primary, you're being judged on everything you've done. You're being judged on your entire career and how you got to the point to where you think you can become president of the United States. And I think that was a very interesting perspective that we took on Kamala Harris because we can't say anything about her now because she's the vice president-elect, but there were some questionable things in her background that I think would be damaging to any candidate. So who do we have, right? Is it just the people that we have that were running for the nomination last year? Because that's not a very impressive group. There were no real breakout superstars. Because if Joe Biden was, and he was going to be the de facto nominee anyway, but I don't know if there was anybody who was running in that large group of Democrats vying for the nomination because they were all chasing Joe Biden for the most part. Bernie Sanders is done, unless he wants to come back and challenge Kamala Harris in 2024. Who knows? But the top two contenders were really, really old white guys. And there wasn't really anybody else in that group. Like, who gets excited about Amy Klobuchar? Like, who sees Amy Klobuchar at a rally and just faints and falls over with excitement? Nobody. And she was supposed to perform well because she's a Midwesterner. She could work with Democrats, work with Republicans. She's fiercely moderate. We just don't have the charisma, a charisma like Bill Clinton, a charisma like Barack Obama, unless I'm missing something. And Esky, good morning. Flynn says, happy to be here. We're glad to have you here. Flynn, Gregory Boswell, good morning to you. Denise Jones, good morning, people. It's Friday. We have made it through another week of 2020. Give yourself a hand. I second that motion. All right, guys, where's this? Here we go. President-elect Joe Biden turned 78 today. This is from USA Today. Exactly 2 months before he will take the oath of office as the United States 46th president. On January 20th, Biden will be older than any other president on their inauguration day. He'll break the record set by his predecessor, President Donald Trump, who was 70 when he took office in January of 2017. The median age of presidents who have taken office since 1960 is about 56 years old. Biden is almost 20 years older. No, he's 22 years older than the median age of every president that has taken office since 1960. Biden has spun his age as an advantage, saying he serves as a bridge to the next generation of leaders. Biden is, however, an anomaly for his party. Democratic presidents have tended to skew younger than their Republican counterparts. Indeed, of the 5 youngest presidents ever elected, 3 have been Democrats from the modern era. John F. Kennedy at 43, Bill Clinton at 46, and Barack Obama at 47. So I'm 45 years old, so I'm right in that age group. Oh, y'all would never vote for me. Biden is older than all but one of the 5 living presidents, Jimmy Carter, who at 96 has lived longer than any other US president. And then there's some other information that goes detailed about the presidents and their ages and their birthdays and all this other stuff. I think it was Joe Biden's connection to Barack Obama, the fact that he is a familiar commodity, because Joe Biden wasn't the villain until he became a front runner for the Democratic nomination, right? So all of the things that you heard about Joe Biden, especially his 1994 crime bill stuff and all these other ridiculous and outlandish things that people were saying about him, it was amazing that we didn't know or we didn't care or it didn't matter when Joe Biden was vice president for 8 years under Barack Obama. Because all of the things that were brought up about Joe Biden, all the terrible things and the rumors, and he did this and he touched this person, all of that was there in the 8 years that he was occupying space in the White House with Barack Obama, but it didn't become any kind of an issue for Democrats, because there were Democrats that were trying to plead their case as to why Joe Biden would not have been a good nominee. Now, some of that was friendly competition because there was a flavor for every type of Democratic voter or would-be Democratic voter. There were so many choices that if your issue was the economy, if your issue was guns and gun safety, if your issue was climate, like if that was your sole issue, if these were your only issues, you had a candidate that was narrowly focused on just one of the myriad of issues. And I think that's ultimately bad for Democrats because there are so many issues. There's so many that you can be a candidate that just focuses on one particular thing, and you can grab a section of Democratic voters that simply will not vote for anybody else. And that's very segregated. It's very difficult for a person to have political experience that runs the gamut in all of the issues that Democrats want to see addressed, whether it's student loan forgiveness, whether it's higher wages, whether it's looking at the disparities in the criminal justice system. It's difficult. Who has experience in 35 different categories of issues that Democrats want to see resolved with the policy pen in one form or fashion? Let's go here. As Trump fights defeat, Republicans more excited for their party's future than Democrats. And so this is confusing because if the leader of your party, if the Republican who got more votes than anybody else is Donald Trump, where's the optimism in that? And this is why I'm troubled, because they clearly see something and understand something that we don't. The style of leadership and just how poisonous he is to democracy and to the US Constitution. He's going to be a kingmaker for the Republican Party through the midterm elections of 2022. And Donald Trump is certainly going to have some heavy involvement in one form or another in the 2024 presidential election cycle. He's going to. Why would that give anyone a level of optimism unless Republicans have fashioned themselves for the new incarnation of their party where they literally give up on being president? They're not going to get the popular vote. If you have states like Georgia that are red, if you have Texas now within 5 points, or Georgia, I'm sorry, that's blue, Texas within 5 points of becoming a blue state, they lost Arizona. Arizona was one of those states that was always electoral college votes for the Republican going back, at least 25 years. The Republicans can be successful, not successful for the country, not successful in providing meaningful relief to the American people, not successful in that way, but successful in corralling power without ever being president, because they do have governorships. They do have the majority in state legislatures. They rule the courts. They rule the US Supreme Court. They rule the Supreme Court, the state Supreme Court here in the state of Wisconsin. If they look at their trajectory as one in which they can galvanize power without having the presidency, then I can understand why their outlook is more optimistic. As President Donald Trump continues to fight the election and dispute Joe Biden's victory, polling has indicated Republicans are more enthusiastic about their outlook for their party's future than are Democrats. News network calls have branded President-elect Joe Biden, exactly that, President-elect, though Trump has refused to concede, denouncing the judgment of the lamestream media and is continuing to pursue legal action in a bid to alter the outcome. Biden has looked to focus on the transition process regardless, branding Trump's actions as, quote, an embarrassment as the president's team pursues its last ditch efforts, despite having failed to demonstrate the type of widespread foul play they have alleged thus far. While Biden's win has been welcomed by prominent Democrats across the party's political spectrum, in a recent YouGov Huffington Post poll, only around a third of the party's supporters said they were enthusiastic about its future. Among Democrats, or those who lean Democrat, asked about how they feel about the party's future, in general, 32% said enthusiastic. The most common answer, chosen by 43%, was satisfied but not enthusiastic. 1 in 10 said dissatisfied but not upset, while 6% said they were upset about the prospect of the party's future. Here's what I don't get. When you look in the grand scheme of things, with traditional red states now trending toward the blue line, Georgia, like that is a tremendous victory. If anything, that progress should give Democrats and Democratic leaners more optimism. Because if you have a state like Georgia that has been traditionally red, but its electoral college votes have gone to a Democrat for the first time, probably since Bill Clinton, then that has lasting implications for local races and for state races where we know a lot of change takes place. I'm sure Georgia has its fair share of racial disparities and problems in the criminal justice system and incarcerating individuals for low-level drug offenses, just like any other state. But with more people voting for Democratic candidates and a Democratic platform getting more momentum in the state of Georgia, they can be much better off, because we know, especially states that have metropolitan areas and big cities, urban areas that have a large number of African Americans, when you have those smaller towns and those smaller rural counties that are overwhelmingly conservative, while their populations are smaller, their percentage of turnout for Republicans is extremely robust. And that is how they can get Republican-controlled legislatures that make decisions on behalf of majority Black and brown cities. That has been the problem here in Wisconsin. The gerrymandering is also a serious problem. Big issue. We are under the thumb of a Republican legislature. It's almost like how the suburbs surrounding the city of Milwaukee form this noose, this economic and social and cultural barrier around Milwaukee, where Milwaukee is essentially choked off from some of the opportunities and amenities that exist, where the property values are higher, where the schools are better, where they have cleaner systems of transportation, et cetera, et cetera. Milwaukee is essentially cut off from that, but it's controlled by a legislature here in Wisconsin that is so incredibly conservative, they can't even agree that we should be wearing masks during a pandemic. They can't even work with the governor to provide relief on businesses that are essentially forced to close because they could be considered super spreaders. They can't even agree on that. Milwaukee is under that same leadership, even though we have our own representatives here, we have our own county government, we have our own city government, we have a mayor. But all of those individuals that we vote for in the city of Milwaukee that see things dramatically different than the Republican-controlled legislature, it doesn't matter, because Madison still pulls the purse strings. And here's what makes it even worse. So Milwaukee is viewed in a very particular way by some of these conservatives that represent these smaller outstate districts, mostly because of our disparities, mostly because of, I said disparity because the way we look here and the way they look in other parts of the state. To have this narrow-minded, myopic, stereotypical view of us. But we here in this county pay for just about everything, every service that those smaller governments need to function. More people live in Milwaukee County. More people work in Milwaukee County. More people pay property taxes in Milwaukee County. More people pay income taxes in Milwaukee County. The amount of revenue that is generated from travel and tourism back when we had it, more of those resources come from here than any other county, meaning that when we create our state budgets, money that was generated by economic activity in Milwaukee goes to fund the schools, the roads, the bridges, the healthcare, and the infrastructure of small towns that elect Republicans that hate Milwaukee. This is the biggest problem that we have. And they're still winning that fight. And I don't know how we get ourselves out of that, because the way our districts are cut, our legislative districts are cut, it is going to be like that for the foreseeable future. We just had a census. It was supposed to be completed on October 30th because the Trump administration knew that the longer they extend the ability for people to fill out the census, the more the demographic changes in America will be realized. So they stopped the census early. Republicans still have control of the legislature here in Wisconsin, meaning that when we get the numbers from this shortened census count, the Republicans are going to gerrymander the districts even further because they have to. When you have states like Texas bordering on becoming a blue state and you lose Georgia, now that's Republicans lose a state like Georgia because now that's a blue state. They're very worried that they will not be able to have Wisconsin implementing conservative policies, especially when we play our role in presidential elections. So they are going to make sure that the Republicans that are in office right now and still control the Wisconsin State Assembly are going to remain there for another 10 years. So the city of Milwaukee, which is the economic engine of the whole state, is going to have to do battle with the people who we're giving an allowance to. And that's the way you have to look at it. These small towns do not and cannot generate enough economic activity on their own, in which they need revenue that is generated and added to the state budget by big cities like Milwaukee and Dane County. And it's preposterous, right? Because they literally need Milwaukee to be successful. They need more people to be working. In fact, they need the wages to be higher in Milwaukee so that when we are paying income taxes, more of those resources are going to fund programs and government and the functionality of some of those smaller, more rural areas. Good morning, folks. Let me get back to some good mornings here. Udell Harris, good morning, my brother. Have a blessed day. You too. Tammy Reed, glad you're here with us. Good morning, Tammy. Rodney Jackson, where is that recount money coming from? It's coming from the Trump campaign. So essentially Trump donors. It was $7.9 million they needed to pay by noon on Wednesday if they want to do a recount in the entire state. Instead, they're paying $3 million just to do a recount, what they're calling a partial recount in Dane County and in Milwaukee County, which are the counties that Donald Trump lost the worst. But he thinks that by spending $3 million of somebody else's money, it's going to overturn the results in the counties where the results are less likely to be overturned. Keep 2023 says, it's not Dems versus Republicans, as if one side better than the other, both against you, third party needed. I'm going to humor you for a second, Mr. or Mrs. Keep 2023. We've tried third parties. In fact, of the electors that we have, right? I'm going to get to the Electoral College names of the people in just a moment. I said I was going to talk about it yesterday, but I'm going to talk about it today. The Constitution Party actually has 10 electors. So there's the Democrats, they have their 10 electoral, because we have our Electoral College count in Wisconsin is 10 because we have 8 members of the House of Representatives and 2 senators, so that's 10. So there is a third party that actually have electors in the Electoral College. Here's the thing. Nothing is stopping anyone from voting for a third party. And I think that where people are always focused, and we got to get out of this mindset that the only elections that count or the only elections that matter are presidential elections. You know how exceedingly difficult it is for a third party that does not promote itself or advertise or make itself known or visible in the off years. So you're going to hear about these third party candidates, the Green Party and the Democratic Socialists and the Constitution Party and a whole bunch of other parties when they're filing paperwork because they want to get on the presidential ballot. But what about all of those other days in which there is no presidential election? So to that extent, I blame third parties for that. They're terrible at marketing and promoting who and what they are. When it's presidential election time, we are overwhelmingly focused on the Democrats versus Republicans because really for the last 175 years, that's all it's been. But when the fierceness of the debate between Democrats and Republicans in presidential years dies down the next year, that year after or going into the midterm elections or the year after the midterm elections, Where are third parties? What are they doing? How are they promoting themselves? And how are they making themselves viable for the next election? But here's the other thing. There are democratic socialists that are elected in the United States government. Bernie Sanders, probably the most notable democratic socialist who tried for the Democratic nomination, which was just pointless because Democrats were going to make sure that someone who is not a Democrat does not become the nominee of the Democratic Party. Bernie Sanders was starting off on the wrong foot completely. He was, and we can have that conversation because I'm sure we're going to need to. Just like, what was Gary Johnson? He was the Libertarian candidate. I want to see, was he this? Who cares? Either this cycle or last cycle, Gary Johnson was a Libertarian candidate. Even though Libertarians have a lot of Republican and conservative proclivities, especially when it comes to economic matters, but the Republican Party would never nominate a Libertarian to lead their party. Even if the Libertarian had the best and most popular Republican ideas ever, they wouldn't do it. But for some reason, the Democrats were supposed to take seriously someone who was not a Democrat, but wanted this person who was not a Democrat to lead the Democratic Party. That's an issue. But of the 87,000 elected officials that exist in the United States, there are, at last count, 9 Democratic socialists. That number might be slightly higher because I don't know how some of these House races have ended up. I do know that QAnon now has its first member of the House of Representatives, a woman whose name escapes me, whose name I wouldn't say even if I did know it. Third party candidates can get more traction and can better communicate what they're about at the local level. You know, if you run for school board in Milwaukee, you can win with 2,000 votes. Or if you run for alderperson, because that is where the majority of the Democratic Socialists, and I would argue they're a viable third party, because Bernie Sanders has probably done the best marketing and promoting for third party candidates of anybody. He's a well-known commodity. Bernie Sanders, come hell or high water, good or bad, he has 100% name recognition in the United States. Everybody knows who he is. Not only do they know who he is, most people, whether they like him or they hate him, can spout off a couple of his policy ideas. So he has been a tremendous boost to people that don't want to vote for the traditional Democrat or the traditional Republican. Our chairwoman of the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors, the most powerful legislator in Milwaukee County, is a Democratic Socialist. So she would probably be the 10th. I don't know if she outwardly says that she is, but she is. Marcelia Nicholson. Of the 9, probably 10 Democratic Socialists that are serving in elected government right now, that's a very small percentage, which also shows you it's not popular. Even when led by Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders raised a lot of money. I don't know how much he raised between the 2020 and 2016 election cycles, but it's hundreds of millions of dollars. So there is some financial viability to his platform. He raised a lot of money. He prided himself on the fact that he got a lot of money from small donors. He did, good for him. But there's only 10 Democratic Socialists out of 87,000 elected officials. It's not as popular as people think. It's popular in theory, but it's not popular amongst actual voters. Bernie had this unusual kind of campaign in that he would get a lot of young people to show up at his rallies. The average age at a Bernie Sanders rally was maybe 30, it was probably 25. But that didn't turn into electoral support, meaning that there were people that supported the idea of Bernie Sanders' policies, but did not vote for him because he had 2 legitimate shots to secure the Democratic nomination. Even though it would have been difficult, he was unable to do it. But what can happen is those that believe in third-party candidates, you have to promote them when there's no presidential election, because thinking that a third party is going to be viable when it comes to the presidential election, because they're not going to be financially viable, because now the cost of entry is $1 billion. If you can't raise $1 billion, you're not going to get close to 270 electoral votes, unless you're just running a symbolic campaign, which I don't really agree with those, because you're distracting from oftentimes life or death directions in the United States. Do we really want, with the pandemic going on and the climate crisis that we have right now and everything else that we are dealing with, some of the disparities that have not really been changed or touched by either Democrats or Republicans, Imagine if we had a third party president, some unusual, weird kind of way, because I guess if Donald Trump got elected, we probably could get a third party elect. I don't know, in some parallel universe. They don't have any support in Congress. That's the other issue. If the House of Representatives and the US Senate are Democrats, 99% Democrats and Republicans, you have an independent, there's an independent candidate or a senator in Maine, and you have Bernie Sanders. Even they caucus with the Democrats. So if you get a third party presidential candidate and they go on and get 270 electoral votes, I have no idea how. They're not going to have members of their own third party in Congress in which they can come up with policy ideas with. Meaning, you get a third party person elected president, they're still going to have to choose a side of Democrats or Republicans when it comes to all of the policy that they're going to need to get out of the House of Representatives and the US Senate. What third parties would have to do is get more legislative support. Right now, there are a few elected at the local level. I think Chicago leads the charge with 6 Democratic Socialists serving on their common council in Chicago. But what that can lead to is more people running for whatever the third party is, the Democratic Socialists in the Illinois state legislature. And then they have a level of accomplishment. They can promote what third parties are actually about in the Democratic state legislature. Then one of them can run for the House of Representatives. And maybe that works in Illinois because they already have Democratic Socialists at the local level. Then maybe Iowa says, oh, well, maybe we'll run a Democratic Socialist or another third party in our state legislature. And they win. And then they get a speaker's gavel, maybe in the state of Minnesota or in North Dakota. But it would take generations for that to happen because third parties are not planning and marketing and promoting themselves, so they will not be viable when people are paying the most attention, and that's during presidential campaigns. Sahara Ali, good morning to you. Glad you're here with us. Okay, so let's get to the Electoral College here. This one is from upnorthnews.com. Democrats, Republicans, and the Constitution Party have announced who they will send to the Electoral College if their candidate wins the state on November 3rd. So clearly these electors were selected before November 3rd, but the names have not changed. Democrats, Republicans, and the Constitution Party met in Madison to officially pick their electors for the presidential election. Wisconsin will send 10 electors, one for each of the state's congressional members, to cast votes in the Electoral College following the election. Under state law, each party with a presidential candidate on the ballot selects its electors, and the electors for whichever party wins the state in the general election go to the Electoral College. The Republican candidate is President Donald Trump. The Democratic candidate is former VP Joe Biden, and the Constitution Party candidate is Don Blankenship. Literally never heard of him a day in my life. A former CEO of a coal company called Massey Energy, who was convicted of conspiring to willfully violate safety standards after 29 Massey employees died in a mine explosion in 2010. What? Did I read that right? The Constitution Party candidate is Don Blankenship, a former CEO of coal company Massey Energy, who was convicted of conspiring to willfully. I remember that. I remember when that happened. And he's the third party candidate. See, here's another reason why third party candidates don't exactly have the best reputation. Willfully violated safety standards after his company lost 29 employees in a mine explosion in 2010. Before Democrats picked their electors, Ben Wickler, chairman of the state Dem party, addressed concerns about a recent report in the Atlantic magazine that detailed how Trump's campaign is working on contingency plans to bypass the election results. One of those plans would have been to have lawmakers in Republican-controlled state legislatures send Trump loyalists to the Electoral College rather than electors who would vote for the popular winner. So the Supreme Court has decided that, because I was also under the impression that, so these electors are named by the Constitution Party, by the Democratic Party, by the Republican Party, but then once the state's popular vote is decided, that those selected electors, those partisan electors, could then cast their electoral votes for whoever they want. The US Supreme Court says they cannot do that because they are selected by a party. So the Democratic electors can't all of a sudden do an end around and decide they want to cast their electoral votes for Donald Trump. They literally cannot do that. I thought they could. Good thing they can't. Because we were looking at it like, okay, so yeah, they're members of the Electoral College, but they have the right to free choice and free expression in any election, even if it's an Electoral College election. They technically do not. So they can't all of a sudden decide that they want to cast their Electoral College vote for another candidate. They cannot do that. Okay, let's look at the Democratic electors. And they're not a mystery. You know, a lot of people may not know who the people are that will be casting their votes in the same direction as your vote if you voted for Joe Biden in the state of Wisconsin. So here are the names of the individuals. From the 1st Congressional District, Mary Andrejcic. I think that's how you say it. Meg, not Mary. Meg Andrejcic, chairwoman of the Racine Democratic Party and secretary for the state's Democratic Party. 2nd Congressional District, Representative Sheila Stubbs from Madison. 3rd Congressional District, Ron Martin, president of the Wisconsin Education Association Council. From the 4th Congressional District, Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. From the 5th Congressional District, Kari Pennybaker, Wisconsin representative in the Democratic National Committee, former Democratic congressional candidate and board member of Every Town for Gun Safety. 6th Congressional District, Mary Arnold, chairwoman of the Columbia County Democratic Party. 7th Congressional District, State Senator Patty Shatner. She actually just lost. The Democrat from Somerset, Patty Shatner, is the 7th Congressional District representative to the Electoral College. 8th Congressional District Democratic representative to the Electoral College is Shannon Hoseley, president of the Stockbridge-Muncie Tribal Council. And then we have 2 at-large members of the Electoral College, which represent our 2 U.S. senators, which gives us 10 electors in total. The at-large member, one of the at-large members is, as you probably would have guessed, Governor Tony Evers, and the other at-large member is Ben Wickler, the chairman of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. Here are the Republican electors. Let's see if we know any of these names. We probably won't, but let's read them anyway. From the 1st Congressional District, Carol Brunner, chairwoman of the 1st Congressional District GOP and chairwoman of the Southwest Suburban Branch of the Milwaukee County Republican Party. The 2nd Congressional District representative to the Electoral College for the Republicans is Scott Grabbins, chairman of the Dane County Republican Party. 3rd Congressional District from the Republican Party, Bill Feehan, chairman of the La Crosse County Republican Party and state Senate candidate. 4th Congressional District representative, Robert Spindell, Republican member of the Wisconsin Election Commission. He's a Trumper, by the way, Robert Spindell is, who was on our Elections Commission, and he's totally a Trumper. 5th Congressional District, Tom Schriebel, Wisconsin representative for the Republican National Committee and a 2016 RNC delegate. 6th Congressional District, Darrell Carlson, former Republican Assembly candidate and former Sheboygan alderman. 7th Congressional District for the Republicans, Pam Travis, an alternate to the 2016 RNC delegate for Wisconsin. The 8th Congressional District, representative for the Republicans on the Electoral College, Kelly Rue, the peer alderwoman and 2016 RNC delegate. And the at-large members for the Republicans on the Electoral College are Andrew Hitt, chairman of the Republican Party of Wisconsin, and their other at-large member is Mary Brustrin, co-chairwoman for the 2012 RNC, vice chairman of the RNC Midwest region, and member of the state Republican Party's executive committee. There are also electors from the Constitution Party. Not going to read all of these because we probably won't know any of them. Nigel Brown, Dan Harrow, Matthew Kozlowski, Josh Young, Andrew Zelk. I don't know those people. Who are those people? Don't know who they are. Another issue we probably should put some conversation behind is the accelerating rates of the coronavirus. Hospitals are getting to a point where some are at or even exceeding capacity for ICU beds, and that's a problem for all of us because individuals may still get sick or have ailments or need intensive care, but may not be able to get it because of the escalating numbers of the coronavirus. But this story that appeared in the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel is of particular concern because there are staff people of the Milwaukee Health Department that are literally charged with implementing the rules that can help people remain safe and enforcing those rules so that we can have some kind of return to normalcy. And this article talks about members of the Milwaukee Health Department that are receiving death threats. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. What good does it serve anyone in any community? And to some extent, I can feel the pain and empathize with someone who has worked their entire life to start a business, and then their business has been shuttered through no fault of their own, but it's the only way in which this person who may have a family, who may have bills and expenses like everybody else, it's the only way for them to make their living. But then making matters worse, there is no relief or no consistent relief for that business owner, and they were forced to shut down. So I can totally understand the anger and just the uncertainty about the virus, how it's spread, it affects different people differently. There's so many unanswered questions, but I don't know how it benefits anyone by threatening to kill members of the Milwaukee Health Department. Lemon Harris says the progressives are chomping at the bit for an AOC run. Oh, she'll run for president. No question about it. AOC will run for president. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, because timing is going to be everything. Will she run when we have a completely open primary? So let's go ahead and assume that Joe Biden serves 4 years. Kamala Harris runs and gets elected in 2024. Kamala Harris then runs in 2028 and could potentially serve until 2032. There is no guarantee that any of that happens. But if you're AOC and if you're being urged by progressives because there is a particular political agenda that she represents better than anybody, she does so with a fair amount of credibility amongst progressive circles, she is the hero. Fair enough. She's saying things that other people won't say, and she's challenging the moderates and the Democratic status quo and dramatically wanting to move the position of the Democratic Party further and further to the left. There's some nuance in there. Some of it I agree with, some of it I don't. I think Democrats, especially now, need to do whatever they need to do just to get elected, and then they can consider moving the agenda left once and only once they have majorities across the board, super majorities in government. Is that something that's possible? Because people need to see hardcore progressive policies enacted. And I'm not talking about socialist programs like, oh, the police and the fire department, and oh, here come those socialist snowplows. Not that. Some of the other things on the progressive wish list need to be bills signed into law and demonstrate results for the American people before people will even consider voting for someone who carries the banner of a progressive in the United States of America. But AOC's run for the presidency, whenever it is, when is it going to be time? She may not want to wait until Kamala Harris's terms expire. That's 12 years from now. It's a very long time from now. I'd imagine progressives don't want to wait that long because they have a political urgency unlike anything I have ever seen. And if AOC decides that she wants to run in 2024, maybe if Joe Biden decides he wants to run for re-election, you'll have AOC primarying Joe Biden, or a more likely scenario in 2024, if she's going to be old enough, do we know if she's going to be 35 in 2024? Because she's young, like not baby young, but young politician young. If she challenges Kamala Harris in 2024, which is conceivable, because she might be getting fed up with some of the empty policies, her perspective, that will be coming through the House of Representatives because they won't go far enough, they won't be progressive enough, and she might say, screw it, hey, everybody that loves me, send me a whole bunch of money and I'm going to mount my presidential run. It would split the Democratic Party in such a fashion that in 2024, we likely would elect a Republican president. And Donald Trump very well, that Donald Trump he would have a better shot of winning in 2024 if the Democratic Party split itself between its more traditional status quo moderate voters and progressives. It would split the party in such a way that Donald Trump could just come in 2024 and call everybody a socialist. Remember, Donald Trump has received 72, if not 73 million votes. Those people aren't going away anytime soon. I also have reason to believe that if Trumpism, however you want to describe that agenda, if it got like 6 million more votes between 2016 and 2020, it could get 6 million more votes between 2020 and 2024. It very well could. I can't explain the phenomenon. I don't know what he said or what he did to get more people to buy into him and his agenda in 2020 than they did in 2016. That is something that I don't even know where I would go to get the answers for. I have no clue. But we can't. And here's the thing. Maybe it sends a message to Democrats that if we don't start moving more to the left, we might as well just give the presidency to the Republicans, because that is exactly what it's going to be. That if that infighting turns into an unnecessary primary, meaning that we already have the executive branch, and that's damn near all the Democrats are going to get, because we're on our verge of losing the House majority. This will be the last term of a Democratic majority in the House. Nancy Pelosi as Speaker is done. We're going to get swamped in the midterm elections. I'm just telling you this right now, unless something dramatic happens, and I do not know what that is. I don't know what it is. When one party had the White House, the next midterm election, the party not occupying the White House cleans up. It brought the Tea Party in when Barack Obama had his first midterm election. Saw Harry Reid be elected as Senate Majority Leader in George W. Bush's midterm election in 2006. So we're going to lose the House, right? And then with all of the political madness that's going to cause, with the Republicans having the Speaker's gavel again in the House of Representatives, if AOC decides that she wants to mount a presidential bid, Democrats are going to start peeling off left and right, and we're going to have a higher amount of voter apathy than I think we've ever seen. So we, depending upon the decisions that the party makes, we could just be handing the driver's seat and the keys over to the Republicans, because we still have not figured out in which direction we're going to go. I'll give you my opinion on it. I think that more progressive policies are better served at the local level, because then people get more familiar with them and they realize that some progressive ideas are not the boogeyman. They actually help, especially in times like these when we're focused on the economy and making money and raising wages and giving organized labor the power that it used to have. All of that stuff makes sense, but when you have these gigantic ideas of what progressivism is, the gigantic wish list on a presidential scale, because presidential election voters are more conservative naturally. They are. Jay says Dems and Republicans band together against Bernie because they don't want to lose their jobs. There is a large percentage of voters that don't respect either party. Totally. But there's also a large percentage of people in this country that don't respect corporate entities. The DNC and the RNC, yes, they have a specific purpose and a specific cause, but they're also billion-dollar corporations. And just inherent in that is going to be some corruption. I don't know if they necessarily banded together. Like, who knows? Maybe they did. I don't know. I just know that Bernie Sanders' popularity was overinflated, because the people that were showing up to his rallies and showing support, because he raised a fair amount of money, they weren't voting for him. And that's the interesting thing about young people. Young people will, and I don't want to put all young people in a category. Well, I guess if I'm just using the term young people, I'm not specifying an age. It is what it is. But they weren't giving Bernie Sanders the electoral support. Now, he did win Wisconsin in the primary in 2016. But I don't know if that was more a rejection of Hillary. Like, did Trump win in 2016 because people were rejecting Hillary, or they really liked Trumpism? When Bernie Sanders won the Wisconsin primary in April of 2016, was that the first, semblance of this disdain for Hillary Clinton? Because Hillary Clinton has never won the state of Wisconsin. In 2008, when she was seeking the Democratic nomination then, Barack Obama won the Democratic primary in Wisconsin. Then in 2016, Hillary Clinton lost the Democratic primary in April of 2016. Then she went on to lose the state of Wisconsin again in November of 2016. So Hillary Clinton has never won the state of Wisconsin. And so I don't know if that is her weakness as a politician with the sensibility of Wisconsin voters, or were Wisconsin voters more willing to accept a Bernie Sanders style platform? I do not know. Eileen Seeger says, like in relationships, the person who is accusing a party of cheating is the cheater themselves. I wonder how many of the Trump votes were fraudulent. Of what we have seen so far, and I did a little bit of research, not much because it's overwhelming amounts of information. The people that have been charged and convicted with voter fraud and some of the highest profile cases, and one of them was a guy from Wisconsin, known Republican donor, supporter of Mitt Romney and State Senator Alberta Darling, who voted in Wisconsin, but then drove to Indiana the same day and cast votes in Indiana. But of the most high profile cases of voter fraud, where if you want to use examples to illustrate the point that, oh my God, yes, there's voter fraud, and here it is, it's all Republicans. It's all Republicans. Whenever you have what they want to call voter fraud amongst Democrats, it's someone who was mixed up about their date in which they were released from felony parole or felony probation. That's it. Somebody whose release date was actually Wednesday, but they voted on Tuesday, and technically that's a crime. Is it malicious in its intent? No. Is it somebody saying, oh, I'm a felon, I'm going to go vote for the Democrat anyway? How unlikely is it that someone who is just at the very end of their felony sentence, they're just about to get off paper, and then the day before they get off paper, they cast a vote in an election? That would have to be just some kind of an accident, or just a lack of responsibility, because you would assume that somebody would need to know the date in which they get off paper, in which they automatically get their rights restored. But the biggest cases of voter fraud, to where if the Republicans want to say, yes, it's an issue, it's always Republicans, more often than not. But there's a method to this madness here, and Trump knows that by continuing this fight, he is keeping his supporters engaged. They're not going to be willing participants in any bit of Biden policy that's going to need more public support. Trump supporters are even if it's in their best interest to support these policies, they're not going to do it. But it also keeps Donald Trump front and center and leading and essentially owning the Republican Party for the foreseeable future. Now, the consultants and the lawyers and the people that are still working with Donald Trump, even though they know he lost, they're still making an awful lot of money. And that's part of his appeal. I believe, and I don't have any firsthand information, that there are some people that work for Donald Trump that didn't like him, didn't like what he stood for, didn't like what he was doing to the future of the Republican Party, because he just represented a moment in time. But because he pays so many people so much money, whether it's campaign advisors, whether it's strategists, whether it's a whole team of lawyers, Donald Trump has filed something like 4,000 lawsuits that he has filed in his professional career. If you're a lawyer and you work in the Trump administration, you are going to be employed for life. We already know Giuliani is making $20,000 a day, $100,000 a week, $400,000 a month to maintain these lawsuits and to continue to sue, even though none of these are going anywhere. I don't care and don't know what Rudy Giuliani actually believes, but I do know he believes in the power of a dollar. How the Trump campaign blew through $1 billion and now he actually has debt. So when people are contributing to what they think is the recall effort, or the recount effort rather, with Donald Trump, they're actually helping to retire some of his debt, but also pay his lawyers. So there's financial incentive for these teams of people to still be helping Donald Trump overturn an election in which he lost fair and square. All right, guys. Well, that's my time. Appreciate you guys. Have yourselves a good weekend, and please wear a mask and wash your hands and don't touch your face. And have a good weekend. And I'll see you on Monday.